The Galactic Council had always considered humanity's adherence to the Geneva Conventions quaint, almost primitive. Ambassador Thelmora of the Vraxian Collective had once called it self-imposed weakness, masquerading as morality. That was before the incident at Kepler 442b. That was before they learned what humanity kept locked away. The war had been going poorly for Earth. The Vraxian fleet outnumbered humanity's forces 3-1, their ships faster, their weapons more precise. But humanity held the line at Kepler 442b, a colony world of 12 million souls. The battle raged in orbit for 6 days, neither side gaining ground, both bleeding ships and soldiers into the void. On the 7th day, the 3rd Medical Frigate Nightingale descended through the atmosphere to evacuate wounded civilians from New Geneva Hospital. The ship bore the Crimson Cross on white, recognized across 1,000 worlds as sacred, untouchable. Medical personnel wore no weapons. Their shields existed only to protect the injured during transport. The Vraxian captain who gave the order was never identified. Perhaps it was tactical desperation. Perhaps it was cruelty. The reasoning died with everyone aboard when the Vraxian destroyer Claw of Righteousness opened fire. The Nightingale broke apart over New Geneva. Debris rained down on the hospital it had come to save. 247 medical personnel. 112 wounded civilians already aboard. All gone in an instant of superheated plasma and twisted metal. Admiral Chen watched the footage from the bridge of the UES Indomitable. She watched it 3 times, her face carved from ice. Then she opened a channel that hadn't been used in 47 years. This is Admiral Patricia Chen. United Earth Space Command authorization code Crimson 77 Omega. I'm invoking Protocol Pandora. May God forgive us all. On Earth, in a facility that didn't appear on any map, buried beneath 3 kilometers of reinforced titanium and quantum shielding, alarms began to sound. The guards, specially selected, psychologically screened every month, rotated every 6 months, began the unsealing procedures they had trained for but prayed would never come. Inside the Obsidian Wing, behind walls designed to contain nuclear blasts and antimatter breaches, 147 prisoners heard the locks disengage for the first time in decades. These were not ordinary war criminals. These were the ones humanity had deemed too dangerous, too effective, too utterly ruthless to ever be allowed near a battlefield again. Colonel Dmitry Volkov, the Butcher of Titan, who had held a moon against impossible odds by turning every civilian structure into a death trap. Captain Sarah al-Rashid, who had unleashed a biological agent on a captured colony, arguing that the enemy couldn't hold what didn't exist. Commander Jin Wu, who had discovered that certain quantum weapons could induce species-specific madness, and had used that knowledge. They were murderers. They were monsters. They had violated every law of war humanity held sacred, and now Admiral Chen was releasing them with full pardons and a single mission: make the Vraxians regret existing. The Vraxian High Command learned of Protocol Pandora through intercepted transmissions. They laughed. 147 elderly humans against their armada? Let them come. The laughter died 12 hours later at the Battle of Kepler 442b's second moon. Volkov's squadron didn't engage the Vraxian fleet. They seeded the moon's orbit with micromines, each one barely larger than a grain of sand, each one programmed with targeting algorithms that violated 17 treaties. The Vraxian ships, moving at combat speeds, tore themselves apart on a minefield they couldn't detect until it was shredding through their hulls. Al-Rashid didn't use biological weapons. That would have violated her pardon. Instead, she used the Vraxian ships' own life support systems against them, hacking their atmospheric processors to introduce trace elements that weren't toxic, weren't illegal, but induced crushing paranoia in Vraxian neurochemistry. Vraxian crews began firing on each other, convinced of betrayal and mutiny. Jin Wu did something the Galactic Council's scientists still don't fully understand. She weaponized quantum entanglement in a way that made Vraxian navigation computers believe they were somewhere they weren't. Entire battle groups jumped to coordinates that didn't exist, emerging from hyperspace inside asteroid fields, too close to gravity wells, or simply never emerging at all. The war didn't end quickly. The criminals of the Obsidian Wing weren't miracle workers, and the Vraxian fleet was vast. But the tide turned. Every battle became a nightmare of paranoia and impossible tactics. The Vraxians began to retreat not from defeat but from fear of what fresh horror humanity would unleash next. 3 months after the Nightingale fell, the Vraxian Collective sued for peace. The terms were harsh: full reparations, demilitarized zones, surrender of the officers who had authorized the attack. The Galactic Council, horrified by what they had witnessed, rushed to mediate, desperate to get humanity to seal the Obsidian Wing again. At the peace conference on neutral ground, Ambassador Thelmora met with Admiral Chen. The Vraxian's exoskeleton seemed grayer than before, her mandibles trembling. "We didn't know," Thelmora said quietly. "We didn't understand what you were restraining." Admiral Chen's expression remained cold. "You called our laws weakness. You called our mercy primitive. We showed you why we have those laws. We showed you what we're capable of when we remove the chains we place on ourselves. The Geneva Conventions are not to protect us from our enemies," Chen interrupted. "They are to protect our enemies from us, from what we become when we stop caring about being human." The treaty was signed. The Obsidian Wing was resealed. The 147 prisoners were returned to their cells, their pardons conditional, their freedom temporary. They had served their purpose. They had reminded the galaxy why humanity's restraint should never be mistaken for inability. In the years that followed, no species ever attacked human medical personnel again. The Red Cross on white became more than a symbol of mercy. It became a reminder: humanity chooses to be civilized, but that choice is always optional. And in the deepest parts of the galaxy, in the war colleges of a dozen species, a new course was taught: human military ethics and why they matter. The first lesson was always the same. The most dangerous thing about humanity isn't their capacity for violence. It's their capacity for restraint, and what happens when you make them set that restraint aside. The Vraxians learned that lesson at a cost of 400,000 ships and 2 million soldiers. They made sure every other species in the galaxy learned it for free. The Geneva Conventions, the instructors would say, are humanity's promise to fight with honor. But honor is a gift, not a guarantee, and humanity never forgets who made them break their promise first.